Hey nerds, what's up? So I finally read Howling Dark after reading Empire of Silence, I think back in 2024. This is for my 5 dedicated commenters that commented on like every video for 2 years asking when I'd get to Howling Dark. To be clear, I didn't do this because of you. Don't get any ideas. Harassing me doesn't work. But I do hope this video makes you happy. So I actually read this book back in January and I'm just finally getting around to a video for it. So I'm going to start with a non-spoiler review and then go into a spoiler review. A lot of people really wanted me to continue Suneater after book 1. If you weren't around, I gave book 1 a 4 stars. Mostly my thing was I thought it was a solidly written book, but that it borrowed a lot from other things, not in a way that is copying, but in a way that just felt familiar enough that I wasn't necessarily super drawn to go on. I also remember saying I found Hadrian insufferable, which was also an issue, but I did like the whole idea and tool of knowing the end from the beginning, and I thought that was really interesting. So overall, it was a solid book. I don't give 4 stars out just like willy-nilly. It was a solid book, but I wasn't like super dying to go on, which is why it's taken me so long. But so many people really wanted me to read Howling Dark, saying like a lot of the things I had in book 1 just completely disappear in book 2, and I needed to at least give that a try. So I'm here to tell you I gave Howling Dark also 4 stars. However, it's a higher 4 stars than Empire of Silence 4 stars. Like, you have to understand it's a scale. When we're only working at a 5-point scale, it's a lot stronger 4 stars. Whereas I feel like Empire of Silence, I was kind of in between like a 3.5 and a 4, but rounded up because I thought it was well written enough. This is like solidly 4. So I did like it better than Empire of Silence. I did think it was quite a step up in most directions, but in general, yes, I enjoyed it more than Empire of Silence. You guys were right. So as a start of my non-spoiler review, the first thing I'm going to mention is, yes, Howling Dark completely moves on. It's from its Dune inspiration. I didn't get a sense of that at all. In fact, I felt that the world opened up a ton, and one of my favorite aspects of Howling Dark was simply like the politics that were introduced into it. Obviously, a lot of those were threads that were introduced in the first book, but in this book, I feel like they really took a different turn and felt a lot more fresh and unique and just a little deeper than they had felt in the first book. So I really enjoyed that element. Something I had said in my Empire of Silence review is that Empire of Silence just kept feeling like a prologue, and I think reading Howling Dark emphasizes that even more. Like, I feel like now that we've kind of moved on from Hadrian's growing up and how he got here, it's just personally a lot more interesting to me. I think like often I can get tired of kind of coming of age stories. Not that they're not good. Like I said, it was fine. But now that we've kind of come of age for Hadrian, which obviously he's still going to come because his lifespan is so different. But I think now that we're kind of out of that more typical kind of origin story, I am just finding a lot more pleasure in kind of the Hadrian of the now and what's happening there as we get to this future that we know that's going to happen. Like, I finally feel like we really know where this series is going and kind of how we're going to get there. And I think that's also just a huge function of this giant time skip we have in between book 1 and book 2, which is not a spoiler. You find that on page 1 of book 2. There's just this huge time skip. And I think at first, even though it was a little disorienting, it ended up being really beneficial overall for the story for me. Actually, as a side note here, if this video, like you're here to decide to go on to book 2 and it's been a hot moment since you read book 1 like me, don't worry if the time skip is really stressful. I had to be assured multiple times by a friend that it was going to be okay, and it's okay. Everyone's confused by the time skip, and I am here to tell you, it makes sense after a while. It's not you. It's fine. It'll all be fine. Also, one of the elements that I said I enjoyed a lot in book 1, which was knowing the end from the beginning, I feel like is used to even greater effect in this book. In fact, I was so taken away a lot of the times when that is used, like when we're kind of hearing current Hadrian's thoughts and we're kind of in the main storyline. And then suddenly you get this commentary and then you remember, oh yeah, this is future Hadrian writing out all these events. And I feel like Ruocchio knows exactly when to do that to give you a sense of foreboding and to hint what's coming in the future, because it's all said and done. But we're just getting pieces of it as the story unfolds. And for some reason in book 2, I feel like it just really stepped up a notch using that narrative tool in a really good way to build tension and do character work. So as that was one of my favorite elements of book 1, I really loved that it was even done better in book 2. One thing did not change, which is that Hadrian to me is just as insufferable as he's ever been, except that it was like an enjoyable insufferable. You know how you have characters you like to read even though they're annoying? That's Hadrian. Like, he's not annoying because he's poorly written. He's very well written, but he's well written, insufferable character. And I was like rolling my eyes at Hadrian at least like every 20 pages. But you know what? We'll get more into that in the spoiler section. I feel like I can't really get into that in non-spoiler section. If you're here to try to decide if you should go on from book 1, kind of like I will say, like, if you hated book 1 or you disliked it, I do not think enough is different for you to go on to book 2. If you felt like me, where you felt like book 1 was okay, and you're just not rushing off to book 2, then I would say you should pick up book 2, because I do think it is an improvement and it has made me very curious to go on to book 3 in a way that I did not feel at all after book 1. I'm definitely really curious to see how I feel about Demon in White, because supposedly that's the decider book for most people I heard. Like, if you finish Demon in White and you're not just champing at the bit to keep going, then maybe you need to quit. Like, either you're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. I don't know. So I'm interested. I'm definitely gonna get to I swear it's not gonna be 2 years before I get to Demon in White. I'd be shocked if I didn't get to it in the next few months, quite frankly. So, see, hope for you all. Okay, I'm gonna go into the spoiler section. So if you have not read book 2 and that was interesting enough that now maybe you wanna read book 2, click off. I will see you another time, but we're gonna go spoilers now. The first thing I want to talk about in the spoiler section is just Hadrian as a character, because I think that's gonna be one of my favorite things to talk about. And I'm really curious about how the fandom feels about Hadrian as a whole. Now remember, I've only read 2 books. So if you're gonna comment on this, try to bring yourself back to book 2 Hadrian. I'm sure a lot has changed in the books that you've read. But I would like to know if thinking Hadrian's insufferable is a popular opinion, because I do quite find him insufferable. I think it's quite obvious how Hadrian could become a villain. Now, to be clear, I do not think Hadrian acts villainous in these novels. It's kind of a fine line. It's just that I understand how his thinking and how he acts could cause him to become this villain in the future. I truly think Hadrian is trying to make good decisions and really has good motivations. And this isn't just like, oh, for the greater. No, I think he's really trying. However, I think there's aspects of his personality about how it can just go poorly. I don't always think he makes the wisest decisions. I think a lot of the times he makes very snap decisions and thinks very black and white, that things have to be either this way or this way, when I feel like there's maybe some middle ground. And combined with the fact that I think he has a personality that can inspire a lot of loyalty or a lot of hatred. Like, I think Hadrian in the novel is a very polarizing person. We see he can get followers and friends that feel so loyal to him. And also we have people who are so rubbed wrong by him that kind of become united against him. And I think that part of his personality obviously can break bad in terms of a villain origin story. And it's not that I think we're going to get to the end and I'm going to be like, oh, Hadrian, you were the villain the whole time. You really did wrong. But I also think we're going to get to the end and be like, you were so misunderstood, Hadrian. How could anybody think you're the villain? Like, I think it's a really good setup for this character that we can root for and understand why they made their decisions, but ultimately it's going to break bad. And that, for me, is incredibly compelling. Like, that is why I like reading Hadrian so much, because I see that. It's not this typical, like, history's painted him as a villain, but he was right and good all along. Like, personally, when I read the novel, that is not what I get, and I like that about it. So one example of what I'm talking about is when he steals Tanneran, when Basander Lin isn't going to follow his, idea to keep looking after Viragos. Okay, that's not, I've missed syllables in there, but that's fine. I'm on Hadrian's side in terms of, I don't agree with Basander Lin, even though I totally see his point of view. Like, it's frustrating. We shouldn't abandon this. Like, we're so close. On the other side, the way that he goes about this and just snap decisions, like how he treats Jinin and how he just steals Tanneran, like, I think it's underbaked. I think it's half-baked. I think sometimes Hadrian thinks there is one option and there maybe was some other options in there. Like, I think there's maybe something else we could have tried first. And that's why I sometimes find him insufferable, because I think he also just has like a grand sense of himself. But again, that's what makes him interesting. I also think that kind of character flaw about him also helps me personally with how powerful he is. In previous reads, I'm trying to think of what review this was for. I don't know, it might have been for a random video. I talked about how like there's a fine line for me that I don't love reading characters who are so powerful and there's nothing else to them and they always win. Oh, I know what review that was for. Sorry, my friends. That was for Strength of the Few. Will of the Many, Strength of the Few. Yeah, that was for that. I love reading a super powerful and competent character when there's also other stuff there. Hadrian's a perfect example of this because he is very successful, he is very strong, he is clever, he knows what he does, but his personality gets him into trouble a lot. So you have this powerful character balanced out with, well, sometimes my power gets me into trouble in the way I make decisions, which is great for me. I also think the narrative device of knowing where Hadrian ends up is super beneficial because you know it breaks bad. So for example, when he comes back to life at the end, which by the way was crazy, I'm very excited to explore that. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like, oh, so Hadrian just miraculously comes to life. It's like, well, no, we know he survives because he's writing this from years and years and years and years and years in the future. I forget how many time skips. It's probably like a millennium or whatever in the future. So we know anything that happens to Hadrian, he's going to be fine. And because of that device, it actually makes these sorts of things interesting and exciting rather than trite. I hope that makes sense. Overall, I'm just like curious because I do think Hadrian's insufferable. And I don't know if other people are like, no, are you kidding me? Hadrian's amazing. I'm always on his side because I'm not always on Hadrian's side. I guess is what I want to say. But in a way, that's fun. I talked about this for too long. Let's move on. Something else I really liked was the interactions with the Sealson in this book. Obviously, that was something I found interesting in the last book, but I found it way more interesting in this book. I particularly like how alien Ruocchio is making this Sealson. I think it's really easy for a lot of sci-fi to create aliens that are really human-like, and I'm impressed in this book how we really went the opposite direction, and in fact it becomes a plot point about how humans humanize things so often.
For the same reason, I can pick up this pencil, tell you its name is Steve, and go like this. Oh, and part of you dies.
How that is in our nature to humanize things, and even playing off as a reader, how I think we are on Hadrian's side in this because it is our desire, like Hadrian, to humanize them and make them after our own image. And so all of the interactions with the Sealson when they're trying to come to terms, and it's constantly we're feeling this battle of the way our cultures are run are so different that we may never be able to come to a consensus over this, was great. I loved that. I thought it was so strong, and I'm super curious how that's going to continually evolve over the series, like knowing we're just in book 2. And I think this is a 7-book series. I wasn't paying attention. I think it is. You know, how long that's going to evolve and that's going to be our center conflict, I find very fascinating. You know, that is a time where I'm like very on Hadrian's side. I am rooting for us to end this war through compassion and through meeting face to face, and like it going wrong. Like it again is another thing about why Hadrian would go so far to make this work, even if we're seeing, and he's saying from the future, like, I was incorrect. And it's in the same way I felt very sad about Tanaran's death because I had grown attached to Tanaran, and how that kind of played out was depressing and sad. So I just thought that was really well done. And then speaking of other interesting and sad character interactions, the whole thing with Switch was fascinating to me. I'm actually still don't know, I'm kind of in my feelings about it. Like, when I say I don't know about it, I don't mean how it was written. I just mean I'm still surprised Switch did that. I hope we get to see from him in the future and understand that decision more, because like I know it was explained, but I still was so floored that Switch was the one who betrayed Hadrian in that way. And I also I said Hadrian, and sometimes I say Hadrian. Oh, well, you guys, I'm sure, aren't going to be weird about that at all in the comments. Anyway, I feel like I understand Hadrian's response to Switch because it's such a deep betrayal, but also the harshness with which it was done. I'm like, is that going to come back to bite you? Like, that's a thread I'm super interested in. Like, does Switch become an enemy? Does Switch become someone who tries to get back into Hadrian's good graces? Like, I don't, he's going to come back, right? just that it's not a spoiler. Don't spoil anything out. Just let me know, like, yes, there is more to the Switch storyline. That's all I want to know. Because I was actually quite sad about that. Here's bookborn lore for you. I just get really sad by friendship breakups. I have a really hard time sometimes watching movies and books about friendship breakups because I think it is so sad. And maybe that's because I have gone through one in my life and I think they're devastating. So it's extra for me. I just get really sad about those sorts of things. And as far as the last thing, just a couple mysteries I'm interested in. I already ended up mentioning Hadrian coming back to life because, like, what is that? I'm very interested in that. I love the developments to the Quiet and the whole Brethren thing. I'm not like quite sure my mind is fully wrapped around what the Brethren are. I'm assuming that's okay at this point. I'm assuming we'll get more information, but was endlessly fascinated by that part. Loved the Brethren. The whole organic AI thing is hard for me to wrap my mind around, but again, I'm not too worried about it. I figure I'll learn more as the series continues. And then obviously the ending when he's being honored, I'm very eager in hopes that he's going to have some sort of reunion with Dear Daddy, now on this like different level of being honored by the Emperor. So I hope that's what's going to happen. So yeah, overall, I think in the spoiler section, you can see like this book didn't necessarily I didn't read it super quick. There were times where it still lagged for me kind of in the middle section. And I didn't feel like, oh yes, 5 stars. But all of the things introduced in this novel super piqued my interest. All of the levels of depth that we've added, super interesting. So for me, I definitely think book 3 will be make it or break it. Like, I think if book 3 steps up in the same way Howling Dark did for me from Empire, it'll be a pretty much no-brainer that I'll finish the series. But if I feel like it's not, then I might kind of peter out. Like, it's not enough for me to want to keep going. So I'll be curious about that. Anyway, weigh in below on your favorite parts of Howling Dark. Please, please, please be very careful and do not spoil things. I don't want to read your spoilers. Don't hint about too much. You're only allowed to tell me if Switch comes back, nothing else. Tell me especially like the fandom's reaction to Hadrian. Do I have an unpopular opinion or is that mostly the consensus? And as always, if you like these kind of deep dives and reviews, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.